Hello and welcome to Creepy Puppets Presents. I'm your creepy puppeteer, Tommy. Apologize again for the audio quality of this video. I'm moved into my new apartment here and the sound quality isn't good. I have these body pillows, get your minds out of the gutter. It's to cover up this sharp headboard that I've used to sort of cover the back of the recording, so hopefully it's better this time. So I've wanted to talk about aesthetics for a while. Aesthetics is a field of philosophy that is concerned with questions of what is art and what is the beautiful. I spoke about aesthetics in my very first video on this channel ever, my talk at LIPS 2019. But what I want to discuss now is sort of in a more regular context, rather than doing a one-off video. And since media criticism is popular here on the YouTubes, I thought, hey, why not do media criticism as a context for talking about aesthetics? So if this channel has a theme, it's really two. It's sort of evolutionary biology on the one hand and parapsychology on the other. And so I thought it would be perhaps useful to review media in these genres. Now, as I'm recording this, a week ago, Netflix released Amblin's first ever Jurassic Park TV series, Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous. Now, I'm a huge Michael Crichton fan. I thought to myself, hey, I'm officially a paleontologist now, maybe I should give this a whirl. Now, I've only been an official paleontologist for 6 weeks, and I study the Ice Age, and I don't really have any insight, and there aren't any differences, any novelties in how dinosaurs are presented in this show compared to the accuracy of the films. So my paleontology perspective really won't come into play here, but I can link to a much better review of the paleo accuracy of the Jurassic Park universe down below, better than I could do, certainly. I don't think I'll be saying too much different from what other people have said in other reviews that I've read online, but I'm still going to talk about it anyway. So, spoilers. So the first and most glaring and obvious problem is that the animation here is all over the map. If you're of my generation, you grew up in the 90s, you probably remember shows like Reboot and Beast Wars, these first CG cartoons that were really good for the time and look awful today. Well, there's some animation in this show that is worse than the stuff in Reboot and Beast Wars. And I think probably the worst offender is the credits. So if you've ever seen toy commercials aimed at selling action figures to 9-year-old boys, you know that usually they'll have a cheap CGI version of the action figure burst through some cheesy wall or something, and then have the action figure burst through a real wall on the playset. I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about here. Well, they have toy commercials for this show, and I've seen them, and I thought, oh, the dinosaur breaking through the Jurassic World gates, that's just one of these. But no, that's the opening credits to the show. It is literally as bad as a toy commercial. Now, as far as the show itself, the worst CGI is probably the first few minutes of the first episode. It then reveals that it's a VR game, and specifically a VR game contest, and that will be relevant later. And I thought, cool. They're switching the animation styles to distinguish between the world in the VR game and the, quote, real world by making the VR world look legitimately worse. That's cool. But honestly, after watching the whole show, I can't tell you if it was intentional or not, and that's probably not a good sign. The human characters also oscillate between sort of realistic but stylized, maybe somewhat cartoony, to looking completely rubbery, and maybe Isla Nublar is located in the Uncanny Valley. The only consistent bit of animation that's consistently good is the dinosaurs themselves, and that's probably because they were CGI assets already, so it didn't take much work. So before I can talk about the characters and the plot, I need to say that this show can be neatly divided into the first 4 episodes and the last 4 episodes into 2 halves, because they're practically different shows. And so what I'm going to talk about briefly is the first show, the character and plots in the first show, and then transition to the second half of the show. So the main glaring problem here, probably the second biggest problem other than the animation, is that all the characters are very, very stock. Personalities are stock, the gender balance is stock, 3 boys, 3 girls. It's stock ethnic diversity. All the characters are safely played by actors of the appropriate ethnicity. You can practically see the memoranda stamped on the characters' heads. So to briefly run through the characters and their stereotypes, Darius is a black dinosaur nerd. Kenji is a rich Asian dude bro. Ben is a germophobic nerd. He's white, but I'm pretty sure we're supposed to read him as Jewish. Then there's white girl Brooklyn, who's a social media star. Sammy, the Latina body positive one. And Yasmina, the Arab stoic athlete girl who may or may not be a lesbian. I'll talk more about that in a second. So their dialogue is sort of painfully stock for the first 3 episodes. Everyone speaks with dialogue that fits their prescribed personalities. The worst offender of this is Brooklyn. She sounds like a bad stereotype of media personality. It's a miracle she doesn't speak Valley Girl. I will say that one interesting thing they do is give Sammy a thick Texan accent rather than a stereotypical Hispanic one, sprinkled with occasional Spanish. Except for when she pronounces her last name, Gutierrez. She hits that name so hard you can practically hear mariachis in the background. I will say that one bit of subtlety that the writers seem to do is imply a growing relationship between Sammy and Yasmina. Imply that Yasmina is gay, but it's far from confirmed. If it later is confirmed, it will be a really interesting, well-done bit of representation, but given how subtle the writers have been, I doubt that. In the first half of the show, only Kenji gets character development, and that's probably necessary because he is wildly unlikable at first, and so he needs character development just to bring him up to the level of the other characters. Fortunately, there's plenty of character development in the last half of the show. So, turning sort of to the plot, there are 6 kids, ranged from about 12 to about 16, who are chosen to pilot a summer camp experience, although canonically this should be like December, at the Jurassic World park while the park is still open. Darius is there because he wins the VR gaming contest that I mentioned earlier, and the rest are there because they're wealthy or well-connected or famous. For the first 3 days, they just have random adventures in the Jurassic World park. Wrangle dinosaurs, visit Dr. Wu's lab, etc. But then, in the 4th episode, the events of the Jurassic World film happen. And in the Indominus Rex from that movie wanders into their camp and smashes it. So the kids have to go on the run in order to survive. And during this second half, that's where we get the good character arcs. So Darius grows into a leader. Kenji grows into a level-headed second-in-command. Brooklyn becomes less shallow. Yasmina and Ben come out of their shells. Ben in particular through befriending a baby ankylosaurus named Bumpy, who becomes a sort of team mascot. There's a liar revealed plot. Sammy is the obligatory stock Jurassic Park spy working for someone else. It puts a rift between her and the rest of the group, especially Yasmina. She'll spend the rest of the season atoning for it, and it's not resolved at the end, so that's probably something for the next season. At the end of this season, though, the kids have been left behind as the island has been evacuated, with Ben separated from the group and presumed dead by the others as he has fallen off of that stupid monorail. Again, I have just finished the series, so these are sort of first impressions, but the things I liked, the running gag about the park incompetence, references to the films, like how Claire intended to stick her nephews in the camp, some cameos by Blue, although we don't get a shot of Rexy, just in the opening credits. There is suspense befitting the movies. I mean, Jurassic Park kid plot armor is in effect, but it's not nearly as bad as it could have been. Characters do die. I mean, it's off-screen, and they're usually just red shirts, but we do get the, horrified reaction from the kids. Darius's father has died shortly before the events of the series, and it's heavily implied that he died of cancer. So it's very much not as saccharine as it could have ended up. The thing I probably like the most is the Fireforged Friends trope. It's actually discussed here. The characters have an in-depth intimate, painful, emotional conversation about whether or not they consider themselves friends. And they all conclude pretty much that despite surviving together, they're not really friends. They have little in common and probably won't see each other again after they get off Isla Nublar. So them actually becoming friends seems to be the arc for seasons to come. Although there's lots of subtext that implies that they are a lot closer than the text implies. The boys seem to be especially close, especially the friendship that seems to be emerging between Kenji and Darius, and then Kenji's frankly traumatic reaction to Ben's apparent death. So aside from what I've already criticized, one of the main things I didn't like is that this movie is very reliant on you having seen at least Jurassic World, but really all of the movies except Fallen Kingdom, because this, you will probably not understand what's going on if you haven't seen those movies. And so I think, well, this is a way of drawing kids into the Jurassic Park franchise. This is a way of drawing new audiences, maybe as an entry point. But I think kids are probably going to be really confused by this show if they've never seen the movies before. So ultimately, I think you probably should watch it if you're interested in animation, if you're interested in paleontology, which I am both, obviously. But, you're probably better off skipping the first 3 episodes. So what I'm going to go do now is I am going to go and rewatch the Jurassic World movie, come back and sort of, after a couple of days, and give sort of digested thoughts and analyze the context of the movie. I kept thinking there were plot holes and things that were bugging me, so I'm going to go find that out, and we'll cut back in just a minute. All right, I'm back. So the first thing that really jumped out at me is I completely missed, but it rang a bell, was when Sammy introduced her name as Gutierrez. That's a reference to Dr. Martin Gutierrez, who is a character in the books who is probably left out of the film. There's one guy who might be him, and I don't know if they actually confirm that that's supposed to be Gutierrez, but there's a Gutierrez in the book for sure that I think her character is a reference to. In the control room scene, the nerdy guy says, there were 6 kids in Lost and Found, and I'm wondering if that maybe is a retroactive reference to this, as there are 6 teenagers who have been lost. The thing that was bugging me, so there's sort of 2 points of the chronology. This is supposed to take place during Christmas break, which in the United States is usually the week between Christmas and New Year. So if the kids have been there already, so let's say they got there on the 26th. They got on a plane, flew to Costa Rica, and got to the island all in one day. So they're there the 26th. They're there for 2 extra days, 27th, 28th. That means Zach and Gray arrive on the island on the 29th, and so the events of the movie are wrapped up by December 30th. That's really the only chronology that makes sense, and the movie seems to forget that this is supposed to take place at Christmas time. The other important thing, much more significant, is that there's a clear ticking clock in the show that they have to get to the ferries before sundown. However, in the movie, it's explicitly said by Vincent D'Onofrio's character that the ferries will arrive at first light. They seem to have gotten the evacuation time wrong in the show. And in fact, the last ferry leaves at approximately the same time that we still see people in the bunkers, in the hospitals, in the movie. Major continuity snarl there. But if you can look past all that, this is definitely a show for those who are interested in paleontology and interested in Michael Crichton's work. All right, thank you, and take care, everybody.